Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah, a comprehensive analysis of Ibn Taymiyyah's creed. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Sufi Essence with Hammad Syed. In the vast intellectual landscape of Islamic history, certain texts stand as monumental markers, not only for their content but for the profound and lasting influence they have exerted on subsequent generations of scholars and believers. Today, we turn our attention to one such text, a work that, while a departure from our usual discourse on esoteric and mystical traditions, is nonetheless an indispensable key to understanding a major strand of Islamic thought. We are speaking of Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah by the towering medieval scholar Taqi Muhammad Ibn Taymiyyah d. 1328 CE. This is a work of creedal theology, a concise yet systematic articulation of what Ibn Taymiyyah argued was the middle way of the early Muslims. The Salaf al-Salih, its influence has reverberated through the centuries, making it a foundational text for a significant segment of contemporary Islamic thought. Our purpose in analyzing this work is not to endorse a specific theological school, but to engage with it on a scholarly level, understanding its core tenets, its methodology, and its historical significance. It is a work that every serious student of Islamic thought, regardless of their own theological orientation, must engage with to comprehend the full breadth of the Islamic intellectual tradition. Our discourse today will be a comprehensive structural analysis of this profound text. We will argue that Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah is a systematic and concise articulation of a specific methodology of theological inquiry, one that relies strictly on the Qur'an and the authentic Sunnah, without recourse to speculative theology or philosophical hermeneutics. We will follow the book's internal logic, from its foundational principles on the attributes of Allah to its detailed sections on the prophetic Sunnah, the companions, and the eschatological realities of the hereafter. We will illuminate how Ibn Taymiyyah's unique approach sought to purify Islamic creed by returning to what he perceived as the unadulterated understanding of the first generations of Islam, thus providing a crucial intellectual counter-narrative to the prevailing theological trends of his time. Part 1. The author, the context, and the methodological principle. To properly understand Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah, one must first understand its author and the turbulent intellectual and political environment in which he lived. Ibn Taymiyyah was born in Haran, in present-day Turkey, in 1263 CE, a few years after the cataclysmic Mongol sack of Baghdad. This was a time of immense intellectual and social upheaval, where the traditional centers of learning had been shattered, and the Islamic world was grappling with a multitude of internal and external challenges. In this atmosphere, theological schools were in intense disagreement, and rationalist dialectics kalam had become a dominant force, often leading to deep philosophical disputes over the nature of Allah and his attributes. Ibn Taymiyyah was a scholar of exceptional intellect and immense courage. He was a prolific writer, a respected jurist of the Hanbali school, and a fiery polemicist who did not shy away from engaging with and critiquing the dominant theological and philosophical trends of his day, including the Asharis, the Mutazilis, and certain philosophical schools of Sufism. His life was a continuous struggle for what he believed to be the truth, often leading to him being imprisoned for his controversial views. Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah was written in response to a specific request. A judge from the town of Waset in Iraq asked Ibn Taymiyyah to provide a clear and concise summary of the creed of the early Muslims, a creed that could be a middle way that avoids the extremes of theological speculation. Ibn Taymiyyah's response was this short yet powerful treatise. The methodological principle that underpins the entire work is its reliance on the understanding of the Salaf al-Salih. For Ibn Taymiyyah, God, the purest and most authentic understanding of Islam belongs to the first three generations of Muslims, the companions Sahaba, their students Tabi'in, and the students of their students Tabi'at Tabi'in. He argues that their understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah is the most reliable, as they were the closest to the revelation and the Prophet. Therefore, any theological position that deviates from their understanding is to be rejected. This methodological rigor is the very core of his theological project. He rejects the use of rationalist dialectics, which he saw as a foreign imposition on Islamic thought, and he argues that the creed must be taken from the revelation itself, without human interpolation or philosophical reinterpretation. Part 2. The Attributes of Allah. The heart of Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah lies in its detailed and systematic treatment of the attributes of Allah Sifat. This section is a direct and forceful critique of the various theological schools that, in Ibn Taymiyyah's view, had strayed from the creed of the Salaf. His central principle in this section can be summarized in 4 key points. Affirm what Allah affirms for himself, and deny what Allah denies for himself, without tariff distortion, tattle negation, ta'kif ascribing a how, or tample likening to creation. Let us break down this crucial principle. For Ibn Taymiyyah, the attributes of Allah, as mentioned in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, are real and literal. Taref, distortion. This is the act of reinterpreting an attribute to mean something other than its apparent meaning. For example, some theologians reinterpreted Allah's hand Yad to mean power or mercy. Ibn Taymiyyah rejects this, arguing that it is a distortion of the divine revelation. Tattle negation. This is the act of denying an attribute altogether. Some philosophical schools, fearing that affirming attributes would lead to anthropomorphism, negated them entirely. Ibn Taymiyyah argues that this is a denial of the divine perfection. Ta'kif ascribing a how. This is the act of speculating about the nature of the attribute. How does Allah's hand look? How does he descend? Ibn Taymiyyah firmly rejects this, famously quoting the saying of the early scholar Imam Malik. The istiwa Allah's establishment over the throne is known. Its how is unknown, and to believe in it is obligatory, and to question it is a religious innovation. Tamthil liking to creation. This is the act of likening an attribute of Allah to an attribute of creation. Ibn Taymiyyah rejects this, grounding his argument in the Quranic verse. There is nothing like unto him, Surah Ashura 42-11. He then proceeds to apply this principle to a wide range of attributes. Attributes of essence sefadald. These are attributes that are inseparable from Allah's essence. He affirms Allah's face Waj, hands Yadain, and eyes Ayn. He states that these are real, literal attributes, but their reality is known only to Allah, and they are in no way like the face, hands, or eyes of human beings. He argues that to deny their literal meaning is to deny a part of the divine revelation. Attributes of action, Sifatul Fi'al. These are attributes related to Allah's actions. He affirms Allah's descent Nuzul to the lowest heaven, his anger Gadab, his love Hub, his pleasure Rida, and his laughter Dak. Argues that these are real actions and emotions of Allah, but they are not like human emotions. Their reality is known only to him. For Ibn Taymiyyah, or interpret these as metaphors for power or mercy, is to introduce a human and philosophical element into a divine creed. This section is a powerful and direct challenge to the scholastic theology of his day. Ibn Taymiyyah argues that by using philosophical principles to interpret the attributes, theologians had moved away from the simplicity and purity of the original revelation. His approach, which came to be known as the methodology of a Salaf, sought to restore what he saw as the original, uncorrupted understanding of the divine nature. This is a crucial point to understand, as it is the foundation for much of the theology of the Salafi and Wahhabi movements today. Part 3. The Qur'an and the status of the companions. Beyond the attributes of Allah, Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah also deals with 2 other crucial theological issues that are central to Ibn Taymiyyah's creed, the nature of the Qur'an, and the status of the companions. Ibn Taymiyyah dedicates a significant portion of the book to the doctrine of the Qur'an. He affirms that the Qur'an is the uncreated word of Allah Kalam. Allah takes a middle position between 2 extremes. On one hand, he rejects the Mutazili view that the Qur'an is a created entity, arguing that this would imply that Allah was once a speaker and then became one, which is a denial of the divine perfection. On the other hand, he also avoids the view of some extremists who believe that the physical words, letters, and ink of the Qur'an are eternal. For Ibn Taymiyyah, the speech of Allah is a real attribute of his essence, and the Qur'an, as his revealed word, is a manifestation of that eternal attribute. This position, which is a nuanced defense of the traditional view, is a central plank of his creed. His discussion of the companion Sahaba is equally important and is directly tied to his methodological principle. For Ibn Taymiyyah, the companions are not just historical figures. They are the intellectual and spiritual inheritors of the Prophet. Their understanding of the religion, their consensus, ijma, their conduct, are a part of the prophetic legacy and a source of creed. He emphasizes the necessity of loving and respecting all the companions, seeing their disputes as a matter of human error that does not negate their immense virtue. This is a crucial point of polemic against both those who slander certain companions and those who introduce theological innovations that were not known to the companions. He argues that the companions were the most knowledgeable and pious of all generations, and therefore, any creed that deviates from their path is a path of innovation and error. This section highlights the deeply historical and traditionalist nature of Ibn Taymiyyah's theology. For him, the truth of the creed is not to be found through philosophical dialectics or mystical intuition, but through a return to the pristine faith of the first generation. This is a core idea that defines not only his theology, but his entire intellectual and polemical project. Part 4. Eschatology and the Supernatural. The final sections of Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah are dedicated to a discussion of eschatology and the supernatural. Here, Ibn Taymiyyah's literalist methodology is on full display. He reaffirms the reality of all the events of the hereafter as they are described in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, without any allegorical interpretation. He affirms the reality of the torment of the grave and the questioning of the two angels, Munkar and Nakir. He affirms the reality of the day of judgment, the resurrection, the scales mizan on which deeds will be weighed, and the records of deeds that will be presented. He affirms the reality of the bridge Sirat, a physical bridge over hell that the believers must cross to enter heaven. He affirms the reality of heaven Jannah and hell Jahannam, as physical places of eternal reward and punishment. His creed on all of these matters is simple and direct. They are as they are described in the texts, and there is no need for philosophical reinterpretation. This is a powerful statement against the philosophical schools that had, in their attempts to reconcile religion with reason, allegorized these concepts. For Ibn Taymiyyah, the denial of these realities, or their reinterpretation as metaphorical states of the soul, is a rejection of a fundamental part of the creed. His emphasis on a literal reading of the texts is a cornerstone of his theology. The book also addresses the topic of the supernatural, including the miracles of the saints Karamat. This is a particularly important point for our discussion, as it is a subject that is often a point of contention between his school of thought and certain Sufi movements. Ibn Taymiyyah firmly affirms the reality of the miracles of the saints, such as their ability to perform extraordinary feats or to have foreknowledge of certain events. However, he introduces a crucial caveat. The miracle is not a proof of the person's spiritual rectitude, unless their actions are in full and unwavering alignment with the Sharia. He argues that the miracles can also be a deception of Satan to mislead people. This is a subtle, yet powerful critique of those Sufis who, in his view, place too much emphasis on miraculous occurrences and not enough on the rigorous observance of the divine law. If for Ibn Taymiyyah, the true measure of a person's piety is not their ability to perform miracles, but their unwavering adherence to the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Conclusion: a legacy of theological method. In conclusion, Al-Aqidah al-Wasithiyah is far more than a simple book of creedal statements. It is a masterpiece of theological methodology, a systematic argument for a specific way of approaching the divine revelation. Ibn Taymiyyah's core message is that the only correct method of understanding the creed is to follow the understanding of the first generations of Muslims. Salaf al-Salih. Salaf's work is a powerful and direct challenge to philosophical speculation, allegorical interpretation, and rationalist dialectics in matters of faith. He argues for a creed that is simple, clear, and firmly rooted in the texts of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. The book's legacy is immense and undeniable. It became a foundational text for a movement that sought to purify Islamic thought from what it saw as later innovations and corrupting influences. Its principles on the divine attributes, the nature of the Qur'an, and the authority of the Salaf have shaped a major strand of contemporary Islamic thought. While some of its positions are a matter of intense theological debate, especially with the Sufi and Ash'ari schools, its importance as a historical document and as a clear articulation of a particular theological vision cannot be overstated. For a student of Islamic spirituality, this book is essential reading. It represents a different approach to the divine one, that emphasizes divine transcendence and the unmediated word of Allah. It is a powerful reminder that the Islamic intellectual tradition is rich and diverse, and that a true understanding of its spiritual and theological landscape requires an engagement with all its facets, even those that may be a departure from our primary focus. In the end, the search for truth, whether through mystical intuition or textual rigor, is a journey that every sincere seeker must undertake. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual and spiritual journey. Please subscribe to our channel to continue our exploration of the rich and profound essence of Sufism.